Hi, and welcome to East Yorkshire, my first Cities Skylines YouTube series based on the sunny and posh environs of Kingston upon Hull in the UK. If you're familiar with it, or British at all, you know what I just said was a lie. But for everyone else, Hull, as it's nearly always called, is a quirky, small city of around 250,000 people tucked away just inland from the North Sea. Located 2.5 hours northeast of London by train, this city feels a world apart. We'll talk about its rich history throughout the series, but what's most important to know is that Hull's reputation in the UK is similar to what Americans think of Detroit or other Rust Belt cities. A once vibrant and wealthy working class city that saw its jobs dry up and its fortunes change for the worse in the latter half of the 20th century, only to see it bounce back again and begin to thrive in recent years. As I'm sure you can tell from my accent, I am not from the UK. So my main reason actually for wanting to build a city around this concept is because I used to live in Hull. The usual reaction I get when I tell Brits this is, why? But honestly, I loved it there. It's a charming city with wonderful people, and it's ridiculously inexpensive, which I can't say about where I live now in New York. The city of Hull and its surrounding region have a ton of creative potential in this game, and later on in the live play I'll talk about my future plans for this build. Since this is my first build, let's talk about my playstyle and what to expect. I bought Cities Skylines 5 days after it came out, and I've put in about 1,000 hours since. The way I like to play includes a heavy amount of mods and assets, enough to make each and every one of the 32 gigs of RAM I have cry, with a fairly equal blend of realistic detailing and high city functionality. I never get too deep into the simulation of the game, but I want traffic flowing smoothly to and from fully functional buildings. I want diverse mass transit networks, and I want detailed neighborhoods that you could see yourself living in. Creators that use a lot of procedural objects and massive detailing for screenshots are incredibly, remarkably talented, and I enjoy those videos. But what I like for myself is a bit of a different approach. And plus, video games are supposed to be fun, right? My first challenge with this build was the map. This is a custom map based on a heavily scaled height map from Terrain Party. Hull sits at the confluence of the River Hull and the Humber Estuary, a kind of extra thick river that leads out to the sea. But it's the river that's the real problem. The entire course through this map is very flat, and it took hours of off-camera time to get it working, and it's still not perfect. I can already imagine your comments, and yes, it'll all get fixed in a later episode, but I wanted for now to get it up and running, and I've actually already got footage for episode 2, and I've started to adjust how the river will behave there, especially in the city center. I'd also like to mess around with the theming at some point to try and get the water to be brown, which is how it looks like in real life. What you've been watching so far is the initial street layout for the city center. It's about half scale to the real thing, and it's mostly going to be split into 4 quadrants. Later on in the video, you'll see the initial build out of the bottom right area, the old town, as well as the top left area as more of a new town and commercial district. The bottom left will probably have a concert hall or entertainment district added to it. And finally, the top right will have the city center's park, as well as a school and additional housing. Throughout the city center, you'll really be seeing a lot of newer buildings juxtaposed to older ones, even a couple in the old town. During the Second World War, Hull was bombed constantly. Supposedly, German bombers would spend their time bombing the larger western cities of Manchester and Liverpool and Leeds. But Hull, which is the last city on the way back home across the North Sea, and a decent industrial center itself, had all the remaining bombs dropped on them, rather than expend the extra fuel to carry them back. So to honor that, I'm putting in some more modern buildings, particularly in the area around the train station. The thing is, this city isn't really going to have a skyline or heavily dense urban areas, but I do want this area to have some bulkier buildings, closely packed to give an illusion of that density. In fact, I think the tallest thing I'll ever build throughout this series will be the bridge which connects over the estuary, but I'm definitely getting ahead of myself there. Something else I've played around with a lot was the color scheme for this series. Given Hull's location in often gloomy and rainy England, I've decided to push the colors and sunshine in a direction that makes the city have more of a realistic, cloudy day kind of vibe. You'll actually see the colors change a bit around the 7-minute mark as I tweaked between my two different sessions. Trying to get it just right wasn't easy, but I'm pretty confident with where I ended up. For now, the theme is Springwood, which I think just goes so well with the variety of maps and content. But for the most part, this is an area where I'd really like to get your input on. Every monitor will make this look a little different, and I want to not only capture the colors that I think work for my city, but that you enjoy watching and gives the viewer a good detailed viewpoint. Last but not least, I'm using the UK Roads Project roads by Mac Welshman, which are just fantastic and immediately tell you that this build is a little different. I'm a little unfamiliar with them, so I'll try to keep all my searching out of the edits. Finally, before we start laying down some buildings, residents need a way to get into the city. I've put in a quick and dirty roundabout which allows the motorway, which in real life is the A63, to interact with the bottom left corner of the city center. This intersection also lets you go down to what will eventually be the marina area. The problem is that, much like in real life, I can see this area getting choked with traffic real fast. In the future, I'd like to build in the game what hasn't yet been built in real life, which is having the motorway underpass the road, creating a flyover. And that'll be a good excuse to put in some retaining walls and lots of road markings and really get detailed. For now, though, this will have to do. Alright, now we can start placing some buildings. By the end of this, I want people moved in. The bottom right area, which you'll see me adding to around the church, is the Old Town, as we talked about before. And what I'm really looking for here is narrow, claustrophobic streets, cobblestones, old buildings, and commercial buildings for some high street shopping. And pubs. Lots of pubs. Because let's be real, there'll be plenty of pubs in pretty much every build we do, because this is England and trust me, they love to drink. For now though, I'm really looking for an overall feel, street design, and to get that city up and running. In a later build, we'll take a closer look at the Old Town area, do some heavy detailing, and really make it look just right. But for now, speaking of a functioning city, this one's gonna need a name. And this is another spot where I'd like your help. Throw some suggestions down in the comments. If I end up picking your name for the city, I'll name something else in the city after you. My initial thought was to call the city Dull, which comes from the iconic Hull phrase, "It's never dull in Hull." The centerpiece of the Old Town area is the large church. Wait, sorry, Minster. Hull's Minster is actually just a parish church, but was elevated to Minster status back in 2017, but it is gorgeous. In the game though, I'm using an asset that I believe is a French church. Unfortunately, there really aren't any good Anglican or British looking large churches on the workshop. I think this works for now, but I'm not opposed to swapping in a different asset later on. I've also left a nice sized plaza just to the left of it and in between what will kind of be a large government building, and I'll heavily detail that at some other time as well. The train station though, I'm thrilled with. This is an asset that's very popular, it's one that I've used before. I think it again looks a little bit more European than strictly British, but I'll be adding bits to help it fit in better with its surrounding environment. What's important is this train station will really be the main entryway into the city from both outside of the map as well as to smaller villages and market towns that I'll be building to the north and east of here. In real life, Hull also has some rail infrastructure, but for now that's going to be taking a backseat until I get around to building out some of the infrastructure around the city and planning it out more in general. Whatever we end up naming the city, it's going to get a heavy detail in the future. We already had talked about that Central Park. You'll see some of the bridge connections I'm building over the river, and those are going to link to a lot of industrial sites along the riverbanks and will be a strategic part of helping move traffic and trucks through the city and along the more heavy roads. One of the nice parts about working on a series like this is the flexibility. This build will closely mirror the real city and general area of Hull, but will also have more than enough departures to make it feel unique. The scaling in particular has made me make some interesting choices. I've been able to mold the shape and structure of the roads in the old town to match the types of buildings that I wanted to put down, rather than feel stuck making the roads mirror reality. The last project that I worked on, and what I'm sure a few of my early subscribers who are hopefully listening to this might remember, is that I was doing a one-to-one build of New York City. And I'll put some links to those Reddit posts that I made down in the description. But just to cover it quickly, my save broke. I had 1,000 buildings glitching because traffic simply couldn't find its way into the dense city. It's kind of a limitation of the game. Cities Skylines is not meant to have goods trucks stuck in traffic trying to feed and give product to 200,000 plus citizens. And I tried for hours to fix it and nothing would work. I'm super proud and happy about that build, and I wish I could have done more with it at the time, but I don't think it was meant to be. I've taken the time instead to learn how to edit some video and record some audio, and putting my effort towards this instead. I'm hoping one day I can bring back the New York series, even if it's just for one big episode to have everybody take a look at it, but it would take a lot of work just for me to get it up and running again. When it comes to this series though, I have about 15 to 20 episodes in mind. That's what I'm hoping it could be, and honestly I wouldn't be opposed to doing more if people like it and the reception is good. Additionally, I'm going to try to keep this content coming pretty quickly. It took me a really long time to get the learnings of how to make this first video, but I already have some footage shot for the second episode, and I really do plan on trying to queue these up and get them out fairly quickly. On top of that, if you really want the New York content, I am going to consider doing a non-Cities Skylines series talking about New York City history and trivia, because I'm a huge nerd for that kind of stuff. If that's something you'd like to see, once again, hit me up in the comments and let me know. But for now, I really hope you enjoyed the time lapse. I had to make a lot of cuts since you're starting a new city, and in the future you'll see more longer builds. But before we get into the live play, I would of course like to ask all of you very kindly to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And additionally, I am at IThinkYouKnow on Twitter and at IThinkYouKnow with an underscore on Twitch. I stream a couple times a week, not always Cities Skylines, usually other games, but maybe you'll like that too. Alright, let's get into this live play. Thank you for sticking around if you're still here. This is the city center we worked on throughout the video, and I first kind of want to focus on the Old Town area. I really enjoy how the church here opens up onto this large square across this kind of European-style government building. The square itself is also going to extend into this area, and this whole big square is going to be a park. For the rest of the area over here, this is a school. It's just a placeholder for now just to get kids using it, but I really want this entire large square to be a large complex of a school, a secondary or high school we'd call it in the US, but you know they call it a college in the UK. Not a university though, that'll go someplace else. I also still want to kind of play around with the street grid here. I like the residential buildings that I've put in here so far, but I think we can do better in terms of getting the street layout to work and making the transition between these wall-to-wall European commercial office type buildings into this residential neighborhood next to it. All right, zooming out a little bit more, show you this first ring here. Down in this area below the highway, below the city center, is going to be a really bustling marina with some offices and a lot of hipster kind of coffee shops and residences. Much like it is in real life, it's kind of this new build reclamation project of an area that used to not be so great. Over to the west of the city, in this big kind of crooked triangle here, I'm going to be putting some council housing, some kind of big classic 1960s UK tower blocks, as well as the large main hospital for the city and a football stadium, because you can't be a decent sized city in the UK and not have a football stadium. I am also a big fan of Hull City, as the football team there is often called, even though they're in the 3rd division and they're struggling. Other places in the city, though, as we continue to go out, I will have in this area, much like it is in real life, this will be a street which has many long avenues coming off here. They call it the avenues in real life, and it will have a very high-end Victorian homes, lots of trees, little cute roundabouts, lots of detailing. And then alongside the major roads here, there'll be shopping and bars and restaurants and some commercial areas. And then going out into the city as a whole, zooming out all the way here, to the north of the city, there will be, in real life, there's a market town called Beverly, and I'm going to be building that on a much smaller scale in this game. And I will have the rail kind of swing through past the university, which I think will be up here, and then into Beverly to kind of be the separate city just outside the city. For all the other areas that are not part of any main cities, it's going to be mostly farmland. I'm going to very quickly transition, probably right above this area, into very simply detailed farms and large fields, which I think will really help break up the map and also kind of help those frame times and help the game run, so we're not just shoving everything full of city. There will also definitely, once the rail line goes through here, we'll have it go to the seaside and put in a nice large seaside town. Probably right up around here. There's some highland on the map, and I think that'll work well for that cause. And then real long term, I do have the kind of the bridge mapped out here. This might not be exactly where it goes, but it kind of gives me a good idea to work off of for now. And I'd love to have a large industrial city here to mimic what Scunthorpe is in real life. And then probably a couple of small other seaside towns along this coastline that I think we'll just kind of really tie the whole region together and allow this bottom area to contribute with its own rail lines and highways without putting all of the burden up here. But that really does it. Thank you for stopping in. Please subscribe and stay tuned for the next episode, which should be in hopefully a couple of weeks. Catch you all then.